Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me. This is Becky Droz, and you are listening to the Gorilla HR podcast. Today, we are going to talk about a topic that for some people, they really like it. To me, it is a necessary evil of the world of human resources, and that is recruiting. So, as you all know, I came up through HR generalist, manager, business partner, that whole deal. And so I was always involved in recruiting. And I feel like when you're coming up in that world, you have this training of like, here's the applicant tracking system, or here's your spreadsheet from the HR body of knowledge. Like, are you doing things that are discriminatory? But it's never really about like, how do you become a kick ass recruiter and really like fill the jobs with the right people? So to me, I always hated it. I still hate it. I'll say the only time I ever actually liked recruiting is when I was the actual hiring manager and I was bringing people in who were going to work for me. Then I loved the whole recruiting process because I loved almost like matchmaking and finding the person who's like, who can I bring in who's going to make me look good? So then it was pretty exciting. But anytime it came down to recruiting for other managers, I found the process really painful and I really hated it. So to this day, when I talk about even what Guerrilla HR does, I'm always very clear that I am not a recruiter. I am not supporting your recruiting and I want absolutely nothing to do with it. So fortunately for me and for all of you, there are people in the world who actually like not only like this stuff, but they really thrive and have figured out how to turn recruiting into something that's pretty fantastic. So I have with me today Mark Wojcik. His company is East Park Avenue Talent Consulting, and he has a ton of knowledge and excitement around all this stuff. So instead of listening to me talk about it, let's welcome Mark. Hey, Mark.
Hi, Becky. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here today. So, I know you heard and we've talked about this before, but like, ugh, recruiting, hate
Ugh.
it. So, I know you feel different. So, tell us a little bit about like where are you? Like, what is your business all about, and what are you doing, and how did you get there?
Yeah, great question. Great question. Well, recruiting means something a little different to everybody that you ask. And really, recruiting to me is the proactive act of identifying, attracting, engaging, and assessing talent for work. Notice the word proactive. Okay.
Yeah, I definitely caught that. I feel like that is probably step one of where most employers have gone wrong.
Yeah, and so oddly enough, I got into the recruiting industry by chance, like many people do in the industry. I actually had 3 years of inside sales that I failed miserably with, and I showed up at a recruiting agency with a resume in hand, and I was looking for a new job. I just didn't have the connection to my customer base. I didn't know where I wanted to go, and somebody said, "Oh, go to a headhunter or a staffing firm. They help you get jobs." I said, "Oh, okay, cool." So I showed up there, all eager beaver, thinking that they were going to put me into this next dream job. And after about an hour conversation, I realized that wait a minute, they're trying to hire me. And I jumped into an industry that's 100% commission, fee for hire, transactional placement with literally no experience. 25 years old, had no idea what I was doing, and I was thrust into an accounting and finance recruiting desk.
Which had to be horrifying. You don't know the industry, and, if you don't perform, you don't get paid.
You nailed it. And not to mention, I failed both of those courses in college on the way to my business degree. I had to retake them in the summer. So here I am recruiting and asking CFOs, so do you do debits and credits or balance sheets and income statements? Somehow I fumbled my way through for a year and made it. And, later got tapped into the HR recruiting department. I created the HR recruiting department, led that for about 7 years. And then was actually granted the training and development program. And I worked in the headhunting and staffing world for a decade. And during COVID, a lot of the HR relationships that I had built throughout the Charlotte area over the years, I saw them struggling. Their budgets had dried up for third party support they were accustomed to working with me.
Support, outside help to do these things? What are you talking about?
It's odd. It's odd. But many of these HR leaders, they said, look, I'm on task with this really difficult technical search. I don't know how to do it. Mark, can you and your team help? And, we'd charge a big fee for it, right? 25% was the typical placement fee. And during COVID, a lot of these budgets dried up, but there were still hiring needs. And so the same HR leaders were, hey, Mark, I wish you could help me with this, but I don't have the budget. So this idea came to me, Becky, and I actually presented it to the old company. An idea of working alongside the HR leaders or the business leaders rather than working for them. Instead of providing a transaction, providing a resume, a placement in exchange for compensation, I had the idea of providing knowledge and expertise and technique and tactics and tools. Many times I would hang up the phone at the old world, and I'd hang up the phone and laugh. I'd say, "They're going to pay us 20 grand to fill this job, man. All you need is me in your office for a couple of days, and I'll set up all the puzzle pieces so that you can execute." And so the idea was born. And when the old company had said, "Hey, if you empower and train and coach companies to be better at recruiting, they're not going to need our staffing services anymore." I just thought it was really short sighted. And my wife, she pushed me to start the business, and where I proposed is at Latta Park. East Park Avenue is the address to Latta Park in Dilworth. So it's kind of on a personal level where the name came from. Just she was a push to me launching this business. I probably wouldn't have done it on my own, having been at the same company for almost 10 years. But just having that extra confidence in somebody knowing that you can do it was the push I needed. So yeah, I've been in business for almost 5 years, and that's exactly what we're doing. We help small and mid-sized businesses to accelerate their talent acquisition. We help them to be more efficient, more effective, more skilled at identifying and attracting high performance talent, and that's through training. It's through performance management and consulting.
So would you say then that really that first step where you talked about we need to be more proactive as employers, is that really coming from identifying the potential needs down the road, or is that in preparing your own internal staff so that when you have a need, like you're ready to knock it out?
Nailed it. Both of them. Both of them. So many times companies have these looming hiring needs, but it's an afterthought because it's not right here in front of them. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to think about it because many people like yourself, Becky, they're self-proclaimed anti-recruiters. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to think about it. They want to focus on their task at hand, and so they put it off. They kick the can down the road, and until it bites them in the face or hits them right in the face, then they decide to start recruiting for it. But two, being proactive and preparing the team of what to do, how to do it, what to say, alignment, arranging the interview panels, getting everybody on the same page, and executing. We see that so many times companies lose people at the 11th hour. Some stat I use very often from the Department of Labor that, and SHRM actually supported it, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 37% of hireable candidates are lost during the recruiting life cycle.
Yeah. Well, it's a pain in the ass. It's horrible.
A third of people are lost that would be deemed otherwise qualified hires. So whether the company messed that up, they dropped the ball, they took too long, they had too many interview rounds, they couldn't make a decision. Those are the kind of problems that we solve for businesses.
Let's dig into some of those more. So, I think what I'm hearing there is that the process and the skills that the recruiters need to have is something that's much more than just a transactional skill set. So, I often see recruiting as okay, we have this need. Let's patch together some kind of job description. Let's just pop it up on the web, wait for these applications to roll in. The recruiter reviews, do I see those couple keywords, minimum qualifications, send it off to the manager, and then maybe they respond, maybe they don't, maybe it turns into an interview, but there's not like a real understanding developed. Like it's checking boxes. And I think that that is not effective. You can tell me if I'm wrong there. But how do we go from something like that that is just like these transactions where people don't really, I don't know, maybe they're not vested, maybe they don't care, maybe they just don't understand. I don't know. It could be a lot of different reasons driving it. But how do we go from that to figuring out what does the actual process that is effective look like? That was a really long question.
Yeah, no, and it's good. But it's common, and it's so funny that we'll laugh whenever I see those commercials on TV or I hear them on the radio for Indeed.com, which is a great resource. It's a great tool. It's not the only tool. When you see these commercials where it shows somebody who's struggling with hiring, they can't figure out, oh, a surprise resignation. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? You need Indeed. Indeed, I do. Right? It's like that's going to solve all the problems. Well, yes, it's a great tool to arrange and funnel applicants, but it's only capturing just that, applicants. Right? The highest population of the talent are passive. They're not actively looking for a job. And I always challenge folks when we start to dig in and roll up the sleeves together, challenging companies that how many times have you been in a situation where you detested your job? You absolutely hated your job, or you disliked your boss, or you're frustrated with what you were doing. You didn't see a future in the job, but you didn't actually go through the application process. You maybe complained to your spouse, you complained to your buddies, you stewed over it over the weekend, but you didn't do anything about it. Yeah, and so even those folks that dislike their job might not actually be applying to new jobs. So what we find, and indeed, again, it's a great resource. We use it all the time, and I have a program that I incorporate into any of our consulting and recruiter pro training engagements that helps to elevate the Indeed status. And it's a consultant here in Charlotte that I work with. He's done a really good job. But Indeed is one of 8 sources that we incorporate in Recruiter Pro training to the recruiting life cycle, or the talent sourcing is what we call it. And the most important is number one is checking your talent network. Okay. Companies that utilize, that build, foster, grow, and leverage their talent network, or in Recruiter Pro training, we call it the talent web. It's kind of this spider web theme, right? Companies that utilize that, leverage it, are 30% more likely to fill jobs within the standard timeline for hiring and filling a position under 30 days. So many times that transaction, oh, we have a vacancy. What do we do? Post it. Okay, let's see who comes in. Well, think of all the times you did that over the years and the years and the years of collecting candidate data. The reason why headhunters are good at what they do and why they deliver top talent is because they've got these databases of 600,000 contacts. So they come to the table with all these names, data, emails, phone numbers. Companies like small, medium-sized business of all industries can do that as well. You don't need a fancy applicant tracking system. You don't need expensive tools. You could even do it on an Excel spreadsheet. I've got other free resources that I implement for my clients, free resources that they can utilize. And then again, it builds on now to the future. So when you have another job like that open again, instead of starting from scratch, you go back to your talent network.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. When I moved to Charlotte, gosh, I don't know, 14 years ago, I had previously lived in Delaware and I was a senior generalist at that time for a really large, actual global engineering company. And so I moved down here and I got an interview for an HR job with an engineering company that was a little bit more local. And the hiring manager that I was talking to was like salivating, like, "Oh, I would love to get all your connections and all your contacts on LinkedIn." And it was a little bit creepy actually, and I didn't get the job, and I think that that was okay. I was okay with that, but it was somebody who was starting to tap into that back then already who was like, "Oh, I wanna hire you just so I can have those LinkedIn connections." And I was like, "Okay, you're a little bit creepy, but yeah, I get that part."
Well, it's so true. I see it a lot with manufacturers. You know, where you have the high volume hiring, and a lot of times it's with the same type of positions. Electrical construction, landscaping, lawn care. Look, again, this stuff builds on itself, and that's why the best agency recruiters can charge the fees they do, because they have the connections that companies don't. The corporations don't. In theory, right? And you don't need fancy LinkedIn subscriptions or these really expensive tools necessarily. Most small and mid-sized companies that don't have massive global hiring needs can do this stuff on their own. They just need a little bit of guidance.
I think that's, like, such a great message because I do think that there's a perception of, one, we if we don't have all the money to throw at it, we're never gonna be successful in recruiting, and that's simply not the case. It's that there are a lot of, free or low cost tools that it's knowing how to take advantage of them and fully utilize them that can allow you to be successful.
It really comes down to time, Becky. The biggest gaps that I see with corporate HR, corporate talent acquisition, and how their struggles, or they're not competitive, that is, with hiring and recruiting top talent, is time and salesmanship. Okay, recruiting is a sales job. Make no buts about it. It's a sales job. It takes savvy. It takes curiosity, kind of an interrogation model, and treating it as if it were a deal, a sales deal. So many companies we see that just don't put the time into it. They check the boxes. Can you do this? Can you do that? Are you comfortable with this shift? Are you comfortable with this money? Okay, cool. All right, here's the next step in the process. And these are people.
Yeah, and they're forgetting about the value proposition of that, like, you check these boxes, but I have to check your boxes too. Like, it's a two-way street.
So even the folks that are unemployed, you look, the battle for talent has never been harder, but the access to talent these days has never been easier. It's never been easier. So, I mean, look at all the opportunities that people, even unemployed in the W 2 mindset, the W 2 framework, unemployed people still have other choices and means and ways of making money
Oh, for sure.
more
Yeah.
than ever. So, I see so often, going back to the manufacturer's example, that folks take it, businesses take it for granted that, well, he's out of work. Oh, she's out of work. Well, of course they're going to take this job. Well, not necessarily. I've seen it a lot of times where they don't take a job. They said, you know what? I don't necessarily need the money right now. I'll take a look again next week.
Well, and I think people are just working different because I have that conversation too. Because I get tired of hearing like, "Oh, people just don't wanna work anymore," which is like crap. Like, people wanna work. They just don't wanna work for you in your traditional context of what work is. Like, work is something different. Work might be like, I've got whatever my side hustle is, and it might be doing something that's in the gig economy. So I think you're exactly right that work, maybe it's not W-2 employed, but doesn't mean that they're not working and earning money to live.
I don't preach that companies should be rolling out the red carpet for every single candidate. But what the basis of Recruiter Pro training is looking at every engagement as if it were a sales transaction. Especially when dealing with corporate talent acquisition. When I'm working with folks, and we got a client like right now in the engineering space, and two former agency recruiters, both of which left the agency world after about a year. Not uncommon. The average turnover for an agency recruiter is 80% in the first 6 months. They're either fired or they quit. But they've already forgotten the sales mindset. And they quickly, you see them with all these requisitions, 20 jobs that are hanging over their head. They start to funnel into this check the box mentality. And what we preach in Recruiter Pro training is that to focus on every single deal in a vacuum, every single recruiting life cycle in a vacuum, as if it is your last day. And if you don't make the deal, you might not be with the company anymore. So when you put that mentality, that mindset into people, well, then when they're actually doing the job, it's not so bad. It's more of a mindset and a confidence type of philosophy to instill in corporate talent acquisition and human resources.
So then along that line of thinking about like that competency and that mental thought process that makes someone successful, what do you think is the one thing that makes a, I won't even say recruiter, but person responsible for recruiting or filling a role, what is the one thing that will make them successful?
Wow. One thing. One thing.
Like the top. It's going to be multiple things, right? But like what is the one thing that's like if you have this do X whatever it is, like what is the game changer?
I would say it's not so much of a an attribute rather than a philosophy of leave no stone unturned. We encourage through Recruiter Pro training that every recruiting life cycle has a quarterback. Okay. And for the football fans out there, the person who's leading the entire offense, the quarterback in football doesn't play every position. He or she can't play every single position. The quarterback is responsible for throwing the ball and moving the offense forward, but the quarterback is responsible for being in the huddle and directing traffic and making sure that everybody follows the game plan, making sure that everybody is doing their job and doing what they're supposed to. So I would say the most important thing for anyone who is a frontline recruiter, whether that's corporate talent acquisition or the human resources leader for the company, is to leave no stone unturned. Don't assume that the hiring manager is got it covered. Don't assume that the recruiter is going to follow up with the information that the candidate requested. Don't assume that the candidate has no other job opportunities pending. Don't assume that they're interested in the job, right? Leave no stone unturned. Get down to brass tacks of whatever it is, so that leaving any type of engagement, every step of the recruiting life cycle, beyond a shadow of a doubt that you've got it covered. There's leaving nothing up to chance, and there's no juggling. So, a quality or a philosophy that I encourage for all the best recruiting professionals is to leave no stone unturned, no guessing, no assumptions.
You never know. Don't make an assumption. I love that. Okay, so now I wanna know, since you have this extensive career in this world, what is the hardest role that you've ever had to recruit for, and what made it so challenging?
Ooh, wow. Back in the day, it's funny now as a trainer. Some of the hardest roles that I had to recruit for were directors of training and development, or training and development analysts. Some of those are really tricky because there's a blend of the facilitation, of course, being on stage, delivering classroom facilitation and training, but also the instructional design components of like creating the training. I know it's something that I struggle with. I've got teammates that help me now create some of those training decks and PowerPoints and stuff. Those are really, really tough. Compensation,
Yeah, yeah.
those were really hard to fill.
As a compensation expert, let me tell you, we are special.
So the analytical, but also HR savvy, that combination, the blend, whenever a company would ask for sales comp experience or executive comp experience, it's like, oh no, those folks were niche and very difficult on the HR side. So I would say the two, training and development and compensation.
I can see that too. I'm thinking about that in the sense of different roles, particularly when I've had like some of the back in my day, like some of the engineering leadership, kind of for that same reason, right? Particularly in those technical roles, you have people that are really great technically, and they might get promoted or they might hire to another company because they are looking to move up in their career and they think that managing others is the only way to do it. And then they come in and they don't know how to manage people. They know how to be good technical people. So I think, that's kind of like the comp space, like, because I always describe my work as like an art and a science. There's data to it, but there's also understanding people and motivation and asking what do people need and want and all of those good things. So I see any kind of role where you have that combination of you need to be able to understand people and work with people, but also understand some technical or data driven piece. So finding the people that can do all of that is tough.
And just another quick plug to Recruiter Pro training, Becky. Like what we encourage all of our program attendees to really embrace is the belief of flexibility and how important discovery is. Okay, intake. Some people call it intake conversation, intake meetings with hiring managers. In Recruiter Pro training, we call it discovery. Okay, so at the onset of any new recruiting campaign, especially a position that's a greenfield position, a brand new role to the company, how vital it is to have all the stakeholders in the room together, engaging everybody in discussion and having complete continuity and absolutely being on the same page with what the expectations are. Nothing, and I mean nothing, derails a recruiting campaign than misalignment.
Totally agree. Love that. I think it's not only having the stakeholders, but then also, and I'm going to say it because it's been in my experience, understanding the priorities and who gets to ultimately make the call. I've been in situations where we were doing recruiting and manufacturing. And so we might be looking, for somebody else who's going to be in a manager or supervisor level, but the person running the plant compared to HR, compared to the other departments, compared to quality, like they have their own little vested interests. And so it would be really hard to get on the same page. So I really like this whole idea of discovery in this process of getting all of those stakeholders together and really agreeing on what's important here and what's our goal in this process.
Again, nothing derails a recruiting life cycle than the cameo, like celebrity. We call it the celebrity guest in Recruiter Pro training. The celebrity guest, the CEO, or the consultant, or the business unit leader's spouse wants to go to lunch with them. Is surprise. We thought we had everybody on the same page, and then there's this celebrity guest that comes in to do the final interview, and it messes up the alignment. And meanwhile, there's been hours and hours and hours of work that equates to salary dollars that are now being lost. If you don't make the hire, if the position doesn't get filled, it's hours and hours and hours of time value of money that are lost. And so a lot of what we do is help companies recognize that, yeah, you want to make the right hire. Of course, you got to get the right position. You got to get it filled with the right person. But along that path, look how much money you might be losing. So get your stuff tight and sharp and have consensus with all the stakeholders before the recruiting campaign begins.
Yes, and I'm stealing that, the celebrity guest, because in my own consulting work with comp, I've seen that. Fortunately, it doesn't happen that often, but where we've gone through a process and come up with a plan and we know our philosophy, we got the data, the salary structure, everything. And then when it comes down to, and here's what we're looking at for market adjustments, and then I'll call them that celebrity guest pops in and is like, well, we're not going to do that. We're not going to spend those dollars. And it's like, ooh, everything that we just worked towards is off the table, you know?
Time killer.
So I'm going to summarize and you tell me if I've got this or if it's wrong. So in this process of recruiting, one, we don't have to be afraid of it. It is not this big scary thing. It really comes down to preparation. And if you don't know what that preparation is, reach out to somebody like you because you can help figure out what does that prep look like up front so that then when you have these open positions, you're ready to hit the ground running. And in that process, it is the discovery and making sure that all of the stakeholders are working towards the same thing.
That's right.
And then boom, you find your amazing person, you get them in, and then you have also worked with comp to make sure that you've got total rewards that you're going to be able to retain and reward these great people that you brought in. And then it's the full circle is complete.
Yeah, I'd like to see them working with comp before the recruiting campaign
Oh,
begins
bingo.
because, again, nothing worse than going through the entire recruiting life cycle, getting to the end. The money piece is a deal breaker, and they can't meet in the middle. It kills. You hit two of the 5 Ps of recruiting. So one of our philosophies in Recruiter Pro training, and it's part of Unit 1, which is Headhunter Methodologies, is the 5 Ps of recruiting. And the first one is preparation.
Okay.
The second is prioritization.
Love it.
The third is proactivity. The fourth is presence. And the last is practice. So, like anything else in life, you're not going to get better at it if you don't practice. If you're not doing this routinely, if you're not dealing with these activities, it's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to miss things. You're going to overlook things or cut corners because you're focused on other priorities, right? So, if you're not prepared, well, then it's hard to prioritize. And if you're not prioritizing recruitment and it's falling by the wayside, well, then clearly you're not being proactive and you're not going to get proactive talent or passive talent. And if you don't have the presence, meaning you're doing 2 things at once, or you're dealing with other priorities, or it's an afterthought, or checking the box. If you don't have the presence during the course of the recruiting life cycle, you're going to miss things. And practice makes perfect. So 5 Ps of recruiting.
Well, I love it. Well, all of our listeners will know that. That's a great takeaway to start putting the 5 Ps into practice now and hopefully have a much better process along the way and more success and get the right people. Mark, thank you so much for coming and chatting with me and just telling me a little bit more about what you do and kind of demystifying some of the things that tend to derail recruiting.
You nailed it. Sounds great, Becky. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Gorilla HR podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation about recruiting and listen in again next time.
That's it for this episode of the Gorilla HR podcast. We hope you found some unconventional wisdom and actionable advice to help you in your own HR journey. Remember, we're all working together to build better workplaces. Want to join in the conversation? Send us your questions, stories, and maybe even your own guerrilla tactics to podcast@gorilla-hr.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with your network. Until next time.